Well, it's the holidays, so I thought I'd give you guys a bonus video this week. Before I get into today's video, I wanted to give a big shout out to everybody who's been subscribing and following me on YouTube. I'm currently undergoing a little bit of an evolution on how I want to present my content to my viewers. You'll probably have noticed that there's a little bit of difference in my style as well as a little bit different presentation methods that I'm using currently. You might see some fluctuations on how I present my content, but my goal is to make sure that the content is concise and understandable to all my viewers. Thanks for bearing with me as I work through some of these creative challenges. Now on to the video. As a dungeon master, I'm always looking for creative inspiration. Now, I might find that in simple things like player actions or just the environment, where most of my inspiration takes place before I actually create the adventure itself. But what about those moment-to-moment situations where you just need a little bit extra flavor to get your players juiced up and amped up? I look to the dice. So rolling dice is pretty much one of the most standard things in a Dungeons & Dragons game. Unfortunately, nowadays, that dice rolling action has been taken over by a digital click. Now, think about it for a second. Those dice actually represent the player's action. Not just are the players looking for a success or a failure, but there's a lot of minutia built into those die rolls that you as a dungeon master can take on some inspiration from. Let's point to the basics: critical hits, critical failures. Now, in a lot of games that I watch, a critical hit and a critical failure is just a success or failure. If it's a critical hit, you're going to get double damage, but that's about where it ends. Now, I've played a lot of role-playing games in my life, and a lot of systems actually lean into this as a way to inspire players and dungeon masters to add a little bit more flavor to the game. What I'm talking about is not extra damage or extra results, but in actual fact, flavor. Look at it from a movie point of view. When you watch a movie and you see heroes doing amazing things, think about that in the form of die rolls. Think about those critical moments. Rolling a natural 20, yeah, it does deliver you double damage or critical damage in most cases, but what if that natural 20 also resulted in something game-changing, something amazing that happens in the game that normally wouldn't be represented by the rules? For example, they disarm an enemy. They successfully hit the enemy so hard that it knocks them off a cliff, or better yet, sunders them to the ground, rendering them unable to do anything for a couple rounds. Now you're probably thinking, oh my god, you're breaking the rules, Dwayne, that's not written. Well, that's the fun of critical hits and critical failures. I often use these as dramatic moments in the gameplay to really amp up the players. I'll give you one example is a natural 20 when a giant hit one of my players. Now, I could have just said double damage, you get knocked down, whatever the case may be. But in this situation, I said that the blow was so hard from his critical hit that it broke the player's shield. He lifted his shield up and he defended against the blow so hard that not only did it break the shield, it smashed through and caused extra damage on the player. It's these little moments where you read into the die rolls to give you that little bit of inspiration that dungeon masters need and give that player a little bit of a rah moment where they get really excited about the game and they'll be telling these tales for weeks and months to come with their friends. So let's look at the worst possible thing that could happen to a player who rolls a natural 20 when he's in combat. He gets the critical, gets very excited, and he rolls damage for his attack, and he gets the minimum damage that he can roll, or worse yet, a 1. Then he rolls his critical result, and he gets a 1 on that. So that really hyped moment, that exciting moment of rolling that natural 20 was just undermined by the fact that his damage output didn't match the excitement of the natural 20. Now, depending on the monster that he's fighting, if it just happens to be a routine monster or an underling, not the big bad necessarily, I would rule that that natural 20 serves to just take that monster out of the equation right off the bat. Especially if the monster's only dealing with double-digit hit points, or maybe 20 hit points or anything like that. Heaven forbid it be a goblin or a low-level monster, and the character fails to take that monster out with his critical hit. Really doesn't sell the hype factor of the natural 20. Now, on contrast, look at your critical failures. Now, a player who goes to do a skill test or goes to do a combat roll and rolls a natural 1. Likewise, there should be something really dramatically bad that's going to happen. Not such that it's going to alter the path of the adventure or maim a character for the rest of the adventure. Don't be afraid to go outside the rules for a second. That critical failure could result in a sprained ankle, a broken bone, a loss of a piece of equipment, for example. Imagine a player was climbing and rolled a natural 1 on his athletics check. Who's to say that he doesn't get tangled up in his own rope and his quiver of arrows falls off his back? Having something happen that drives home the impact of a natural one is not a bad thing and really makes the players feel like they're invested in the adventure and that anything could go wrong at a moment's notice. Players aren't the only ones who can get critical failures in Dungeons & Dragons. If your monster rolls a natural one, don't be afraid to tell the players. Maybe have something dramatic happen, like that archer who's about to fire at the player reaches into his quiver and realizes that he's out of arrows. Or worse yet, in a more comedic fashion, have your goblin charge after the player only to roll a natural one and slip on a banana peel or slip on something that causes him to go flying across the ground, splaying out and dropping his sword. Don't be afraid to play up the natural ones as a boon to players who are really needing that extra little advantage, rather than just simply saying the goblin misses or the minotaur throws his axe and misses. Try and use your imagination to see how that natural one is going to help your players, just like a natural one would hinder your players. Look to the environment for ideas as well. Natural ones and natural 20s are great ways to sort of pull in the environmental effects of a game of Dungeons & Dragons. If they're fighting on a cliff, fighting in some hills, heaven forbid fighting in a swamp against lizardmen, look around in the environment and see if you can pull cues from that as to how the natural ones and the critical successes are going to play into the game. Dice are an integral part of Dungeons & Dragons, and I think for the most part they're just used as a tool to get the results that we want. But take a little time and look at the dice rolls themselves and see if you can pull a little narrative flair from the dice to inspire you to amp up those sessions and amp up those encounters. I hope some of the tips that I've given you are going to help you in your games of Dungeons & Dragons, and most of all, I hope you guys are all having fun playing D&D out there. Have a great holidays, and we'll talk to you soon. Before you go, I need your help. I'm trying to grow the exposure of what we do here at Maverick Games. My goal is to actually bring information to parents and students around the world in hopes that they can see gaming as a path forward for learning, academics, and even support of neurodivergency. Please subscribe, make sure you click on those notifications, and I hope that you'll find content here that will be helpful for you and maybe others. Thank you very much, and thanks for tuning in.